So all organisms need to gather energy and building blocks for their cells, get amino acids, glucose for fuel, things like that. And animals do it by consuming other organisms, right? We are heterotrophs. We cannot produce our own food like autotrophic plants. And heterotrophs fall into three main categories. If you eat autotrophs, like plants and algae, you are an herbivore. If you eat other animals, right, then you are a carnivore. Or if you can eat either, right, you're fairly flexible in what you consume, you are an omnivore. And you're probably familiar with all three of these terms. And as humans, we are omnivores. But whether you're an herbivore, a carnivore, or an omnivore, you need chemical energy, so fuel to make ATP. And that usually comes in the form of glucose. You need organic building blocks like amino acids, so you can build the structures within your cells as well as outside of your cells. And you need essential nutrients, so things that you can't make yourself. So, for instance, we can turn some amino acids into other amino acids, or we can use glucose to build certain amino acids, but not all of the amino acids. Right? Some of them we can't. We call those essential amino acids. Similarly, we have essential fatty acids that we can't build ourselves. Things that we can't build ourselves are called essential nutrients and must be consumed. So we have essential amino acids and fatty acids, which are macronutrients that have to be consumed, that we cannot produce ourselves. But there are also micronutrients that we can't produce ourselves. And if they are organic micronutrients, we call them vitamins. If they are inorganic micronutrients, like sodium or iron, things like that, we call them minerals. Out of the 20 amino acids that we have in our body, 10 of them we can produce ourselves, but the other 10 are essential amino acids, right? We have to consume them. And foods are called complete proteins when they have all 10 of those essential amino acids. Animal products tend to have all of these amino acids. So meats, eggs, cheeses are all complete proteins. Vegetables tend to be incomplete proteins. That said, if you eat certain vegetable combinations together, those meals can be complete proteins. So if you are vegetarian, for instance, it's very possible for you to have a complete diet. You just have to be a little bit more thoughtful about what combinations of foods you eat to make sure that you're getting all of your essential amino acids and fatty acids. And your essential fatty acids are omega-3s and omega-6s, things like that you will often find on like the packages of food. They'll say, all your essential fatty acids, right? Most of your fatty acids are not essential. You can produce them yourselves, but there are some that you need to consume. And deficiencies in these are pretty rare, right? We eat plenty of fat generally in our diets. Vitamins, as we mentioned, are essential micronutrients that are organic. Micronutrients doesn't mean we don't need them as much. It means we don't need as much of them, right? So we need them to survive, but we need them in very small amounts. So they're micronutrients. And organic micronutrients are vitamins. Some of these micronutrients, these vitamins, are water-soluble. So all your B vitamins and vitamin C, for instance. And this means they're really easy to absorb and take up. But they also get pushed out in your urine fairly quickly. So you need to eat them fairly frequently, otherwise you'll run out. Fat-soluble vitamins, like A, D, E, and K, you need fats to absorb them, but they also can stay locked in your fat deposits in your adipose tissue for long periods of time. And so as you burn that fat, it also releases those vitamins. So it takes longer to get them out of your body. But vitamin D, for instance, vitamin D is necessary to absorb calcium. And so for me, I like to have good fatty whole milk. That's been one of the benefits of having a young child. We got a 2-year-old, is that I get to have whole milk around all the time. And I tell my wife that's great because all that fat in the milk, right, is necessary to absorb the vitamin D. Essential micronutrients that are inorganic are called minerals. And again, we don't need very much of any of these, some more than others, but we need them all to survive. The ones we need the most of are calcium and phosphorus, which are necessary for our bones, sulfur, potassium, which is important for nerve function, chlorine and sodium, so NaCl, salt, which is important for osmotic regulation in our blood and also nerve function. But even things like iron, which we need very little of, are still necessary for you to be able to transport oxygen through your blood. Iodine, you need a very small amount, but it's necessary for your thyroid function and for your metabolism function. Typically in the United States, dietary deficiencies are rare, so most of us don't need to take vitamins. Occasionally we do, right? There are some people who have certain vitamin D or B deficiencies. If you're pregnant, folic acid, which is a type of vitamin B, is probably something you should supplement in your diet. But for the most part, we get plenty of these micronutrients in our diet. But some places you don't. And if rice is the predominant part of your diet, you sometimes miss out on carotene. And golden rice is a genetically engineered strain of rice that includes carotene, so the color's a little bit different. And this is hopefully something that will reduce malnourishment. So malnourishment is when you have an absence of an essential nutrient in your diet, one or more essential nutrients. This is different from undernourishment, which means you just are not getting enough calories. So you can be getting enough calories, but not be getting all of your essential nutrients, and we call that malnourishment. Undernourishment just means you are using up more calories than you're bringing in over a long term. So you'll use up all your stored fat and carbohydrates, and then that means you have to turn to proteins, and you'll lose muscle mass, and you'll lose important structural proteins, and eventually you can suffer protein deficiencies in the brain, and you can die or suffer irreversible damage. For most animals, there are 4 main stages in food processing. The first is ingestion, where you literally bring the food into your mouth, introduce it to your digestive tract. And then digestion, where you maybe mechanically and chemically break the food down into its component bits. So not only do you rip it apart mechanically with your teeth, but you also break chemical bonds and you turn polymers into monomers, right? You break polysaccharides into monosaccharides like glucose. Proteins are broken down into amino acids. That's digestion. And once you've got these chemicals down to their monomers, you can absorb them across your gut wall into your bloodstream, or whatever sort of fluid you're using. And then what's left that you didn't absorb, you eliminate or poo out, right? And that's undigested material. That's not wastes. That's not cellular waste. That's stuff that you never absorbed in the first place. And there are a lot of different ways for ingestion to occur. You have suspension and filter feeders, right? Like these baleen whales that just swim through the water, and whatever krill get caught up in their baleen teeth, they'll take in. Or sponges, which are an example of filter feeders. You also have substrate feeders who just eat what they're moving across, like caterpillars, right? Or earthworms. You have fluid feeders, which have to drink fluids, which suck it up. So a lot of little mites or insects are examples of this, like mosquitoes. And then you have bulk feeders, and this is sort of an outlandish example of a bulk feeder, where you just eat a bunch of stuff at once and then break it down once it's inside you. Snakes. This is a snake eating what looks like a cow or a deer or something. Anyway, bulk feeders. We are bulk feeders. We'll eat a big pile of something and then worry about it once it's inside us. After ingestion, we get to digestion. So this is breaking down food into small enough molecules that we can absorb them across the surface of our digestive tract. This includes mechanical digestion, which means you're just physically crushing and ripping something to make it smaller. But you're not undergoing chemical processes. You're not breaking chemical bonds. So chewing is a great example of mechanical digestion, as is mushing in your stomach, right? Your stomach churning. And this increases the surface area of food and makes much more of it available for the next stage, for the enzymes that are going to help you chemically digest your food. Chemical digestion involves the actual breaking of chemical bonds. So you take a polymer, like a polysaccharide, like starch maybe, and you break those bonds in between the monomers until you get just individual monomers floating around. And same thing with proteins, which are polypeptides. You break those peptide bonds, until you get individual amino acids. This requires the help of enzymes because these are chemical reactions. And again, this happens more efficiently when you have chewed your food mechanically to increase the surface area. And remember, from 131, when you're breaking bonds like this between polymers, this is called hydrolysis, breaking of bonds with the addition of water. Absorption is sort of the most important part of this because you're taking these nutrients from your gut and absorbing them into your body fluids. So for most animals like us, that means absorbing them into your blood, and then your circulatory system moves those nutrients all around your body to the tissues that need it. And then whatever you don't absorb is eliminated from your digestive tract, all of that undigested food. This is why things that are tough to digest, like plant cellulose, often end up out the other end, right? So corn, for instance, you may recognize as it leaves your body unabsorbed. And because digestion usually involves enzymes, right, to chemically break down food, and sometimes involves things like acids too, to unfold proteins or to kill bacteria on the way in, most animals have specialized compartments where you have this stuff occur so that you don't risk digesting your own cells and tissues. Some animals are small enough that they can just do digestion cell by cell, right? Where, for instance, in a sponge, your cells all have contact to your food particles and can each engulf the particles on their own by phagocytosis and finish the digestion inside the cell using their hydrolytic enzymes inside their lysosomes. Most animals are too large for that to be possible. You have too many layers of cells, and so you have to do extracellular digestion in one of those digestive compartments we talked about, and then deliver the monomers through a circulatory system to the rest of your body's tissues. So you have to have some sort of digestive cavity, and with very simple organisms, we call this a gastrovascular cavity because it functions both in digesting and distributing nutrients. Cnidarians, for instance, have a gastrovascular cavity, right? We have this one opening, the mouth. Food comes in, and then you have to break it down using digestive enzymes that these cells produce. But the food particles, after they've been broken down into monomers, are distributed to those same cells within this gastrovascular cavity because the cells are only maybe 2 cell layers thick for this wall of the gastrovascular cavity. This isn't possible, again, for larger animals like us. More complex animals have a complete digestive tube, which means you don't just have a mouth, you also have an anus. This allows you to eat more food before you're finished processing the old food. That makes you more efficient at processing these nutrients. And when you have a whole tube, you often have specialized regions that are able to carry out specific functions with regard to digestion and then absorption. And from worms like earthworms to insects to birds and reptiles, most complex animals have this complete digestive tract with different sections along the way that perform different functions. In mammals, which we're most familiar with, we have a complete alimentary canal that has accessory glands along the way which secrete digestive juices and enzymes through ducts into that canal to help us digest things. And those glands are things like salivary glands, pancreas, liver, and then the gallbladder helps as well in terms of storing bile, although it does not secrete anything. And we have smooth muscles that have rhythmic contractions, which we call peristalsis, that move food along the way, sort of like you would squeeze a tube of toothpaste, right, from the bottom on up. And we have thick muscles that we call sphincters, valves, that regulate movement between compartments, like from the stomach to the intestines, for instance. And here you can see a general schematic of how this works, right? You have your main tube, and then you have glands like the salivary glands and the liver and the pancreas along the way, which dump helpful juices full of enzymes and other things into the canal at the places where they are needed the most. For instance, your mouth and your small intestines. And here you can see the actual organs at work doing this in an anatomically correct diagram. And we'll talk a little bit more about the mammalian digestive system here in the next video.